Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Executives from multiple cell phone companies are testifying before the Senate today, answering questions about a probe involving Republican senators. Chad Pergram has more.
Republicans want to know how Jack Smith dialed up the phone records of 9 GOP lawmakers, 1 House member, 9 senators. Smith was investigating if President Trump tried to subvert the 2020 election. Smith did not access what was said on the calls. He only requested data showing who was talking to the president around January 6, 2020. Democrats say the tactic is justified when conducting an investigation like this one. But Republicans ripped Smith when he testified to a House panel last month. They believe it was Smith who was actually meddling.
The Senate is scrambling to avoid a third government shutdown under President Trump as a deal to fund the DHS takes shape. Senate Republicans calling Democrat demands a partisan wish list, but Senate Majority Leader John Thune signaled that the back and forth between Democrats and the White House was a good sign of negotiations moving forward. Meanwhile, House Republicans continue to call out Democrats for their stance on the funding of DHS. This is House Majority Leader Steve Scalise.
Democrats want open borders. Democrats want mass amnesty, and they're willing to shut the government down and wreak havoc with the American people to do it.
The alleged multi-million-dollar fraud scandal in Minnesota is coming under focus at a Capitol Hill hearing today. This comes as evidence of stealing taxpayer money in the state continues to emerge. Steve Harrigan has more from Minneapolis.
People actually come here from other states to defraud the city and the state. That's what happened with 2 men from Philadelphia. They came here to Minnesota, used AI to build a fake medical services company with fake clients. They billed the state out of millions of dollars before being caught. And we are seeing a much greater effort from local law enforcement to try and calm things down here, especially when it comes to these blockades people are setting up outside their neighborhood. They took apart at least 11 blockades over the weekend. People also getting fed up, calling the city saying, we want these blockades out of our neighborhood.
Vice President J.D. Vance briefly spoke to reporters about the latest round of talks between the U.S. and Greenland, saying the talks are still early regarding the future of the island country, adding it holds an important role in the U.S.'s future.
Greenland is very important to the national security of the United States of America. I do think that some of our allies have underinvested in Arctic security. And if we're going to invest in Arctic security, if we're going to basically pay a lot of money and be on the hook for protecting this massive landmass, I think it's only reasonable for the United States to get some benefit out of that.
What does the Bible teach about life, and how can we defend it in a culture that is growing more supportive of abortion? As Chris Woodward explains, a new curriculum aims to help answer these and other questions.
The curriculum is from Students in Action, a ministry looking to raise a new generation of pro-life leaders. Talking about this on American Family Radio, Stuart Kellogg of Students in Action said it's not easy being pro-life today.
States such as Alabama and Mississippi basically have outlawed abortion. Unfortunately, the reality is thousands still go on because of the new chemical abortion, because of, we actually have groups in New England sending abortion pills to red states, particularly for that issue.
Meanwhile, Kellogg said that 2 out of 3 Americans and nearly half of Christians believe abortion should be legal at some point.
And let's add one more thing. It is a political loser. I'm not talking in the Deep South. You have to be pro-life. Sure. Nationally, it's a political loser. We have gone, John Stonestreet from the Colson Center uses this term, we've gone from a pro-life, pro-choice, 2-party choices to now a pro-abortion, pro-choice, 2-party choices. The Republican Party is basically a pro-choice party.
That does not change anything about the need to keep babies and their mothers from abortion. In the curriculum, Students in Action gets into worldview, the truth about abortion, when life begins, the history of abortion, and the history of the pro-life movement. This is meant to be taught alongside or with a pregnancy resource center, and it's set up for either a church or Christian school. I'm Chris Woodward.
More news online at afn.net. And download the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Hello, my name is Andy Miller, and I'm the president of Wesley Biblical Seminary based in Ridgeland, Mississippi. We are developing trusted leaders for faithful churches, and we do that based in the authority of Scripture and in the reality that Christians can be transformed. We do that also through bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. We'd love for you to learn more about Wesley Biblical Seminary at wbs.edu, where we're developing trusted leaders for faithful churches.
We inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to hit some headlines, get some phone calls, and just have a good time talking about those issues that are at the core of who we are as Americans. Last Friday, of course, President Reagan's birthday, February 6th. I've got a kid born on his birthday and another one named after him. My middle son, Reagan, runs our Patriot Institute here at the Patriot Academy campus. That's our one-year program for 18 to 25-year-olds. Great chance for them to get grounded in biblical worldview and constitutional governance and leadership skills, communication skills, all kinds of good stuff. So super proud of my Reagan and how well he's doing that. But since it was Reagan's birthday last Friday, thought it would be appropriate to start today's program remembering him and a couple of my favorite quotes from him. It seems like everybody's familiar with the quote from his first inaugural address as governor. So this would be 1967, when he said, "Freedom is a fragile thing, never more than one generation away from extinction. We don't pass it to our kids in the bloodstream. It's got to be fought for. Every generation's got to do that." And he was very aware of that because he had fought the communists in Hollywood, he had fought the communists in California, and he would, in just a few years, have to fight them on college campuses across the state of California. And then, of course, as president, he would defeat communism and go down in history as one of our, he's number 5 on my list, top 5 presidents in American history. And so, anyway, that I think is a fantastic quote. I've had it on my website at patriotacademy.com for 25 years. It's been sort of a theme for us. But there's another quote by Reagan at the end of his public life. So that would have been his first speech in public life as a elected public servant. And then his last one as an elected public servant would be his farewell address in January of 1989. And that's the one where he said, "If we forget what we did, we won't know who we are." He said, "I'm warning of an eradication of the American memory that will lead to an erosion of the American spirit." And that's exactly what ended up happening. So his warning was unheeded. I mean, there were some of us, there was a small cadre of I guess some people called us doomsdayers and, far right and all that good stuff because we wanted to have an emphasis, as he said, on civic ritual, that we wanted people to study civics and understand the Constitution and the Declaration and know where we came from as a country, so that if we did know what we did, then we would know who we are. We would remember that we're a free people because of the sacrifice of those willing to lay down their lives for their friends and their fellow countrymen, that we would know that we would know those stories. We would understand what they were fighting for and understand the values that they were willing to lay down their lives for, that we would remember Gettysburg, and we would remember Lincoln's little short 3-minute Gettysburg address where he talked about how to properly honor those who had fallen, who had given their lives and paid the ultimate price. And he said that we would need to have an increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. In other words, we've got to understand what people fought for. If we know what we did as a people, then we would remember who we are. So I think Reagan's warning, I think Lincoln's challenge, all of those things come together at this moment in time with the 250th for us to do exactly that, to have an increased devotion, which means, whatever you've been doing up to this point, we're going to increase it. However much of your time you've devoted to freedom and restoring the biblical values that made the country great, we're going to have to increase that time. However much money you've been giving to good causes, good candidates, to American Family Association, to Patriot Academy, to candidates in your local area, however much you've been doing, got to increase it. We got to have an increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. And then we have to understand what that cause is. So if we're going to have an increased devotion, we got to know what it is we're increasing that devotion to. It's not just waving the flag out of some empty, shallow patriotism. It's waving the flag and understanding why that flag is worthy of being waved. What does it stand for? What does the American flag represent? Does it mean we're a perfect nation? No. But we don't kneel or disrespect the flag because of bad things in American history or even bad things that the current government might be doing. We still respect the fact that despite our flaws, despite the bad, that the good well outweighs it. And that when you look at America on balance, it's the greatest nation in the history of mankind other than the children of Israel. It is absolutely an amazing story. And so when we remember what we did, we know who we are. And that's why we talk so much here on the program about doing classes on the Constitution in our homes, in our churches, taking a biblical citizenship course and inviting, even if it's just one other family from down the street, or maybe it's the entire youth group or the entire senior citizens Bible study group, or whoever it is for you, that you say, you know what, I'm going to devote some time. I'm going to increase my devotion, and I'm going to spend 2 hours a week studying this class and having some friends over to do it with me. I'm gonna start giving a few dollars here and a few dollars there to invest in liberty and freedom, and I'm going to put my name, my reputation, my whatever credibility I've earned over the years in the community. I'm going to put it on the line. I'm going to be willing to risk my sacred honor, because so much is at stake right now. And that given this stewardship, given this moment in time of the 250th, that God's placed me here in this nation at this time when we desperately need to remember who we are and what we're all about, I'm gonna pick up the microphone. Everybody said they were going to do that after Charlie was assassinated. That was kind of the thing going around, was I'll pick up Charlie's microphone. I'll stand in the gap. I'll do my part, whatever that might be. And I remember saying just a couple of days after his murder that we're all going to be Charlie Kirk's, not necessarily in the same way he had a huge platform and millions were listening to his voice, or in the way that he would I believe gently and politely, most of the time, debate those students on campus and help them see the error of their ways. He was discipling. He was teaching them biblical perspective on whatever that issue was. But I said then, it's not going to be everybody's going to be doing, campus debates and have a radio show or whatever. But every single one of us has a voice. Every single one of us has a realm of influence, even if it's just two people in our life that we have influence with, or maybe it's 20, maybe it's 200, maybe it's 2,000. But we have a voice. There are people that listen, and so therefore we're going to be Charlie Kirk. We're going to do what he did. What did he do? Number one, he studied to show himself approved. So he, out of Timothy, he didn't sit around and just say, I don't know enough, or I'm not an expert enough to speak on that. No, from the time he was 17, he studied hard. He went in and found good teachers and good mentors and did the hard work. And then he was willing to do all of that hard work so that he was ready to give an answer, which meant not only studying and knowing the information, but also practicing. Getting good at communicating, getting good at answering the question. And that may be for you, literally, I do it, practicing while you're driving down the road on your own. Somebody asks me a question about whatever, and I practice. How would I respond to that? What would I say? How would I order my words? How would I acknowledge their position or concern or whatever it is, but then carefully, strategically, tactically come in with good information for them to help them find truth. So be ready to answer doesn't just mean you throw up with your words all over everybody. It means that you you think about it. You do Corinthians, and you speak in love, and you're not a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal, and it's certainly not done out of a self praising way. It's not to show off what you know. It's to literally help that other person find truth. And so that's what I mean when I say be ready to answer. And then, of course, speaking with all boldness, Acts 4:29. I just think if you do those three things, you will be Charlie Kirk in whatever area, and that may be the one other mechanic you work with at the shop. It may be the 5 or 6 other teachers at your little private school, or the 100 other teachers at your public school, or it might be your the other salesmen and saleswomen in your office. Whoever the circle is that God surrounded you with, that you're ready to give an answer when one of them has a question or makes a comment, and the door is open to have that discussion. I think that's what it means for us to have an increased devotion at this moment in time in our nation, at this moment in history. We are being good stewards of what God gave us. All the parables that Jesus used in the New Testament that we read, and we recognize the type of nation they were in at the time, and the politics of their world, not just under a dictator with Rome, but then the local politics of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and that he did speak to the politics of the day, and that he was into politics just as we should be. My friend Neil Mauman's got that great book, about Jesus being into politics. Why aren't we? If we recognize that his parables were timeless, and that when you think about the parable of the talents, for instance, and being the wicked and slothful servant because you bury the talent, whether that's money or giftings or freedom or whatever it is, that children, whatever God's put in your possession and in your sphere of influence is a talent, and to not use it, to multiply it, to take care of it, to be a good steward of it, makes us a wicked and slothful servant. We don't want to be that. We want to be the good and faithful servant. And so at this moment in time, we get to answer the call that Reagan gave 40 years ago in his farewell address, that President Lincoln gave, 1863 would be how many years? 163 years. 163 years ago. Wow, is that even possible? Yes, it is. So Lincoln's challenge 163 years ago to have an increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. Reagan's challenge to do civic ritual, to remember what we did so that we'll know who we are. We get to answer those. And I'm telling you, firsthand experience, when you do what I'm talking about, it is so rewarding. It is incredible to watch young people's eyes light up, to have a member of your church come to you and say, man, I ignored all of that political stuff because I thought it was separate from church, and now I realize that's part, as Charles Finney, part of a religion in a country such as this, and that Christians must do their duty to their country as a part of their duty to God. I'm telling you, when people wake up and they start seeing the whole Bible, they don't leave any parts out. They want to follow Christ in everything, as he said, teach them to obey everything I've commanded. When you get to be even just a little small part of that, because you brought up something, or you gave a little spark, or you hosted a class where somebody's eyes were open, it is so rewarding. And I'm not necessarily saying do it for selfish reasons so that you can have the reward, but I think there is a reason that God gives us that little taste of victory, and then we get to see the fruit of our labor sometimes. Not always. Sometimes we work for things that we're going to be dead and gone before they pay off, before the fruit of that labor is shown. But man, I'm telling you, there are so many opportunities right now to get to see the fruit of your labor. If you will put just a little bit of your life, a little bit of your fortune, a little bit of your sacred honor on the line right now during the 250th, for the next year and a half until July 4th, 2027, when the 250th ends, I will guarantee you will get to see some fruit that you will sit back and you'll say on July 5th, 2027, you're going to say, man, I'm so glad I did that. I'm so glad I was involved in the solution. I'm so glad I invested some of my life, fortune, and sacred honor into saving the country. I promise you, you will be thankful that you did. Our phone number is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. We'd love to hear from you today. We're also going to get to some of the headlines. Of course, we got to talk about Jeffrey Epstein files and all of that stuff that's going on. But I just wanted to start with remembering Ronald Reagan and being thankful for the leadership that we had from him, and taking up the mantle, taking up the flag, taking up whatever analogy you want to use or metaphor. Let's do our part, folks. Let's do our part to make sure our kids and grandkids get to live in freedom. Your phone calls when we return, 888-589-8840, and we'll hit as many of those headlines as possible. I'm Rick Green. You are listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. A New York jury found psychologist Kenneth Einhorn and surgeon Dr. Simon Chen liable for malpractice after they supported and performed breast removal surgery on a 16-year-old girl. The girl, Fox Varian, now 22 years old, no longer identifies as transgender and is described as a detransitioner. The medical professionals admitted during the trial that they didn't know the little girl expressed confusion about her sex, and that the psychologist and surgeon never actually had a conversation about her before the surgeon removed her breasts. The jury awarded the young lady $1.6 million for pain and suffering and another $400,000 for future medical expenses.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you're just not happy with what you've got, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare, and it's proven for more than 30 years it is proven. And we know this from member surveys. People love it, which is why it's grown to hundreds of thousands of members across the country. One big factor, besides the peace of mind that comes from being a MediShare member, the savings is tremendous. It is not atypical for a family of four switching to MediShare to save more than $8,000 a year. It is a difference maker, and you can get 24/7 telehealth. You get access to more than 1 million providers and hospitals. There are flexible options, too, for your budget. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. Here's the number, 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE, 833-44-BIBLE.
Many of you remember 1976 when we had the bicentennial. I know I do. Here in our country, our beloved America, as we celebrated 200 years. Well, now we're celebrating 250 years. We're going to go to some great places on our tours this year. In June and September, we're going to Washington, D.C. We're going to Williamsburg. It's going to be a wall-to-wall trip of American history and learning about our Christian heritage. We're also going to Boston this year. So for those of you who remember 1976, I know there are some of you who remember the year 1776. We want you to come along with us on this particular tour because you're going to be a special guest of ours. So if you want information on our tours, go to wildmongroup.com, WILDMON group.com, WILDMON group.com, and we hope to see you on one of our 2026 Spiritual Heritage Tours.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Rick Green.
Welcome back to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks for staying with us. Remembering Reagan, his birthday last Friday, and those quotes that shared before the break hopefully will motivate you to get involved and remember who we are, what we did, so that we know who we are, and then of course to increase our devotion. The Lincoln quote. You know, a lot of I don't know if your community does it this way, but all over Texas we do these Lincoln Reagan Day dinners. For the longest time, it was just a Lincoln Day dinner, and we really pushed hard 25 years ago, started pushing for Reagan and Lincoln both to be honored at these dinners, since it was right around Reagan's birthday as well. So anyway, maybe you've got one coming up, or maybe you've had one already. But if you've got one coming up, share those quotes that I was sharing in the first segment. Go to the website, listen. You can download the program and share those with your friends and family, or take one of our Constitution classes, and you'll get a lot more quotes out of there as well. So good stuff. But anyway, phone number 888-589-8840. Before I go to the phones, just a couple of comments on the Epstein thing. We're back to it dominating the news. There's all these files, all these things being revealed. I'll say it again. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. The old Bill Bennett quote is accurate here. Really wish the Trump administration had released all this, last year. It's going to be a lot of rabbit trails that go nowhere, or even things that were anonymous or thrown in to taint someone, even though they didn't do anything wrong. And then you've got people that did pure evil, and I don't know that we'll ever know the extent of it. It's a quagmire in a way, because what's really frustrating, I think, to everybody right now is that you had Epstein and Giselle in prison for essentially child sex trafficking and all kinds of other sex crimes, but then nobody else has been prosecuted. So, like, where are the Johns? If these stories that are coming out are true about some of these big names, then at some point you're going to have to prosecute. And if you don't, and maybe some of them, there's this sultan of whatever and people in other countries, then you may not be able to get to some of these people. But if there's no prosecutions, what is that going to say to the American people about what you can get away with as long as you have the money and the political connections? And I don't want to be consumed with this. I said this last year whenever it became the poster child issue for whether or not we were making any progress in draining the swamp. Like, this was the issue that almost everybody was aware of, and they were talking about it. And when very little happened with it, a lot of people got dejected and said, well, see, Republicans and Democrats alike, doesn't matter who's president or Congress or whatever, they're protecting each other, and we're never going to know the truth, and it's never going to come out. And I said at the time, that I wasn't sure whether or not in the files there was going to be any strong evidence anyway, and that most of these people probably covered their tracks, and it's not unlike a lot of crime that happens that that you may know, believe, or even know in your knower, as my pastor used to say, know in your knower that the crime happened and that this person committed it, but you can't prove it, and they end up we can't even really say they get away with it, because they don't get away with it spiritually or even mentally or emotionally themselves, but they get away with it in terms of not having to go to prison for it. And I just think that's what's going to happen with most of the people that participated in this evil. Now, I do think we're going to end up with some prosecutions, and that will be almost like I don't want to at all say that a guilty person is a scapegoat, but it'll be a little bit like the old scapegoat thing, where as long as you get a couple of convictions, the people's conscience will suddenly be reset. It's like everybody will just kind of go, well, at least somebody got prosecuted, even if it's only a few people. So I hope we at least get that far. I just don't know. I am not super optimistic on this issue, and I don't like it. I mean, it's yuck, right? I mean, we all feel that yuck every time this issue comes up. It's a reminder of our total depravity. It's a reminder of what happens when you have politicians that are willing to look the other way. But I will say, I do want to say this before I leave the subject until maybe we talk more specifics on another program. But I think the left and those who really wanted to take down Donald Trump and were really hoping for something that would implicate him in some way, because that was kind of the whole rumor was Trump's in the Epstein files. Trump's in the Epstein files. Well, as it turns out, the only things I've seen so far, maybe I'm missing some stuff that's out there, but is that he was actually one of the ones calling the police saying, "I'm glad you're doing this. This guy's bad." And he had heard, he basically said everybody in New York knew, everybody talked about it, about how bad he was, and he was glad that he was finally being taken down. And so, of course, that raises all the questions of, what did the president know and when, and, what about the parties where you see them together? Was that before he knew, obviously, about any of this? I mean, all of that, I'm sure, is going to come out. But I don't think it's going to be the gotcha moment that the left was hoping for on Trump. I think it's going to be the other way around. I really do. I think he essentially played some 4D chess with this issue, and by the time it's all said and done, the biggest names that are going to end up going down as a result of this will be big Democrat names. Now, there may be some I think there's some Republican operative types, not big, like senator or whatever, but operatives behind the scenes, campaign kind of people that ultimately could go as well, and should if they're guilty and were part of it. So anyway, that's my take on it at this point. We'll see what else comes out in the near future, but it's clearly dominating the headlines and everybody's talking about it. It does beg the question of what's the point in having an FBI and a DOJ if you don't go after something like this? I mean, this is the kind of thing that cross state lines, out of the country, all that kind of stuff. I mean, what's the point of having a federal law enforcement at all other than ICE and the Border Patrol, which is a specific, legitimate constitutional function, as we talked about last week? I mean, that is authorized specifically to the federal government. So, yes, ICE should be in your neighborhood doing what they're doing, executing the law, getting immigration under control, removing people that did not follow the immigration laws. That's what they're supposed to do. But the FBI, the DOJ, that's a lot harder to defend if they're not doing immigration. What other law enforcement should the federal government be doing rather than local and state? So some interesting constitutional questions there. All right, let's get to the phones, 888-589-8840, and I'll come back to some headlines in just a second, but I want to cover this topic that I hinted at. It looks like Rob from Mississippi had some thoughts on the top 5 presidents. Let's see, Rob, my software shut down, so guys in the studio, if y'all can, I hear you now. Rob, go ahead.
You got me now, right?
Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead, man.
So, all right. So I was going to do 5, but I think I'm only going to do 4. So I'll put President Trump number 4, Reagan number 2, Reagan number 3, Lincoln number 2, and Washington number 1. And the only reason I put that in perspectively is because pretty much the first 3 presidents that I mentioned pretty much laid out the table for President Trump. Abolished slavery. Washington was the first president. He did a good job for the Union. And Reagan, I just absolutely love. And I will tell you a quote that you may not remember, you may do, but I've always loved it from Reagan, is that if we ever forget that we are one nation under God, then we are a nation that has gone under.
Yeah.
And I've always remembered that ever since he said it. And lastly, can you give us a progress report on your developments over there in Texas with your constitutional plantation?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. Well, let's first do the presidents. You're so close, man. We're so close in our top 5. I used to have it as Washington number 1, Lincoln number 2, Calvin Coolidge number 3. And Trump number 4, Reagan number 4, and Trump number 5. Because Trump has done so much in this first year of his second term that has been just amazing and bold and constitutional and all that good stuff. And Coolidge is on there because of the constitutionality, because of him keeping us and working hard to move us back into the 17 enumerated powers of the Constitution. But I tell you what, Trump did so much that I had to move him ahead of Reagan, and so that put Reagan at 5 and Trump at 4. And then I forget, I think it was December that I finally made the decision after he freed the hostages, got the hostages back, and just so many different things that he had done, that I was going to move him ahead of Coolidge. So I got him to number 3. So my list is now Washington, Lincoln, Reagan, Coolidge. I'm sorry, Washington, Lincoln, Trump, Coolidge, Reagan. That's my list now. However, I'll say one other thing. When I was talking this through on the air here on the program back in December, I think it was, I started thinking about my list, and maybe you did the same thing, Rob. I counted Washington as number 1. Not so much because of what he did as president in those 8 years. It was because of what he did throughout his life, from the Battle of the Monongahela at 23 years old to being the indispensable man in the Revolution, to leading at the Constitutional Convention and getting that through, to then being the first president. But then when I started saying, okay, if we're going to base it on 5 best presidents, what they did as president in their 4 or 8 years as president, that's a different animal. And I would actually have to rearrange my list because Washington as president is not as impressive as what Trump has done or what Reagan did or certainly what Lincoln did dealing with the Civil War. And so maybe I need another list for greatest patriots of all time in American history. And then Washington's definitely number 1 when you look at everything that he did. And maybe, maybe the rest of the list even changes some. There might even be some, greatest patriots in American history that weren't president, that led in other ways. That would be an interesting list. I'm going to work on that. That would be a very interesting list. I think I'd have to put David Barton in those top 5 for the impact that he's had on the national conversation and restoring the constitutional republic. And seeing now, I'll tell you, it's so rewarding right now to watch so many people say things today that David Barton was saying 30 years ago. It's so rewarding to see policies get implemented that nobody was talking about. But I've told David this before too. It's like, man, you're like a prophet in a way because I'll be sitting down with him and it might just be a private lunch or it might be, we're filming something or doing a radio program and he'll raise some issue that nobody was talking about. And I'll be honest with you right here on the air. I'm thinking as he's talking about it, I'm thinking, hey, bro, that's interesting, but nobody cares. Like nobody's interested in that topic. That's what I'm thinking in the back of my mind. I don't say it to him, of course. And then I'll give you a perfect example. In fact, I think I shared this one on the air last year sometime. But we were filming Biblical Citizenship in Modern America. And we're up at David's place at the museum there, at the Wall Builders Museum and Library, and we were doing his part was supposed to be on truth and courage. And it was a talk that he had given a couple of months before at we were doing a Georgia barnstorming tour, and he and Tim and Tim Barton and myself and Michelle Bachman and Brad Stein and a few others, we did this tour of Georgia during those 2 big Senate races right after they stole the election from Trump. So anyway, I wanted him to record Truth and Courage, the talk he had been given on the road, for our new Biblical Citizenship in Modern America thing. Well, we're up at the museum. He does his whole filming. My boys are our production crew. We're taking care of all the production, and I'm over in the corner working on my computer, not even paying attention to what he's saying. Get back home, they edit it together. I watch it. Doesn't have anything about truth and courage. The whole thing was about proper role of government, about how the founding fathers came up with the things that they did in terms of the Bill of Rights. I mean, he was going through all this stuff. And I watched it. And I was like, no, we need truth and courage. So I was like, David, I'm going to fly you out to California. We need to refilm this and do truth and courage, and we might use that other stuff. We'll see. Well, we ended up using the other stuff. The other stuff became, actually a critical part of the biblical citizenship class, and it actually became a huge deal because he was talking about warrantless searches and all of these things that James Otis, grandfather of the founding father. I mean, like we think of the founding fathers, he was like the founding grandfather. In fact, John Adams said in 1761 that James Otis's speech was that independence was then and there born and would later reach adolescence, which 16 years later, 1776, it reaches adolescence. Anyway, all this to say, it becomes one of the most popular parts of biblical citizenship. Millions of people have been through that class now, and it was after they raided Mar-a-Lago and did all the things they did that were basically warrantless searches. Like they didn't have specific places and things. They literally were just tearing the house apart. And so I called David Barton, and I'm like, man, that was so amazing. I'm so glad you taught on that. That's become one of he's like, I taught on that? I don't even remember that. So all that to say, I'm telling you, the man has been way ahead of everybody else for, almost 40 years now. So he would be in my top 5 patriots of all time. Washington, of course, would be number 1, but that list would look different than top 5 presidents. So I'm gonna modify. I'm gonna figure out how I would do my top 5 presidents if we're only thinking about their 8 years in office. Or I even considering, the only one not to do 8 and do way too long was FDR. And some people would rank him because of his influence as president during that time. And, of course, World War II and all those things. But I would rank him as a terrible president because of the result of the socialist policies that he supported. That whole speech about freedom from want. There's no constitutional guarantee to freedom from want. No, it's actually when you have a want, when you have a need, you go out and work hard. So anyway, I definitely would not put him in my top 5 presidents. But he's longer than 8 years. Anyway, I'm rambling a bit, folks, but I love this topic, and I love thinking about great Americans, and I love honoring great Americans. Again, it's back to Reagan's speech. Got to remember what we did. Got to know the stories of these great Americans. Quick break. Phone number is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. I'm Rick Green. You're listening to At the Core.
Looking to take the next step in your education? Blue Mountain Christian University offers graduate degree programs designed for working adults who want to grow professionally and personally. With graduate studies in business, education, and kinesiology, BMCU combines academic excellence with a Christian worldview. With flexible and hybrid formats and supportive faculty, you can pursue a graduate degree while balancing work, family, and calling. Learn more at bmc.edu.
Thoughts of the child you were carrying keep pouring over in your mind. A deep, unrelenting sadness overshadows your days, and you wonder if you will ever feel whole again. There is hope and healing from a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline, 866-482-LIFE, and talk with someone who has been where you are. Your call is confidential, and we will help you find healing. 866-482-LIFE.
The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt, and it stressed me out. But what I thought was a solution turned out to be a problem. I kept hearing ads about debt settlement that seemed too good to be true. And actually, it was. When I called, they told me to stop paying my bills. That didn't sound right to me at all, so I hung up. Later, I found out that debt settlement is bad. Real bad. Then I learned that there is a right way to pay off your credit cards. It's called a debt management program from the great team at Trinity. Trinity had a plan. In the end, I paid off my bills, I saved thousands, and I even improved my credit score.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
The Word of God tells us many times in one form or another, fear not. Many people are very fearful about some of the many perils and dangerous happenings that are going on in the world. Psalm 91 verses 1 and 2 tell us, he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in him I will trust. I'm Joseph Parker, and we here at the American Family Association would like to remind you, fear not, put your trust in the Lord. We'd like to both encourage and challenge you to aggressively put your faith to work. And one way to do that is to pray Psalm 91 daily for yourself and your family, and keep your trust in him. If you'd like to get a copy of the Psalm 91 prayer for yourself, email us here at psalm91@afa.net. Again, that's psalm91@afa.net.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Rick Green.
Welcome back to At the Core with Mark Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks for staying with me today. Phone number is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Talking about the top presidents in history. I don't know how we got off on this. How did we get off? I think I just rattled off some of them, maybe. I think I was, I don't know what I was talking about. Anyway, such is how it goes. But let's go back to the headlines, because a couple other things that happened this week and over the weekend we haven't talked a whole lot about, and you had this another tanker that our military went after for violating sanctions. And I was thinking about this, last night I was doing Flashpoint. If you're not familiar with Flashpoint, fparmy.com is our website. Great show. We have a pretty cool mix of politics, spiritual, everything else, and just crazy how big that show has gotten. I run into Flashpoint Army people all over the nation. But anyway, last night we were talking a little bit about this tanker because, I think when you see the American military show strength in that way, some people, in my initial cynical side often says, oh, is this a wag the dog kind of thing? Is the government or the administration trying to draw attention away from something, or just trying to flex their muscles? Are we wasting money in areas we shouldn't be and all that? But I think the trust in the institutions is getting a little better. We came into the Trump administration in January of 2025 with virtually zero trust in the administration. It's like total, complete meltdown of believing anything that the deep state said. Meaning, if the State Department said it, or the White House said it, or most politicians in Congress, everybody would just be like, we just didn't believe anything that they were saying because of the way we had been treated in the COVID era, because of the lies that had been spread. We were starting to see some of this stuff come out about the vaccine schedule and just how much of a fraud so much of the federal government had been. And so our trust in the institutions was at an all-time low. And I think other than the Epstein files, which is why I said that in the first segment about the Epstein files being kind of bumbled by the Trump administration, had they come out with if they'd released all this stuff last January or February, pretty close to immediately, then it would have helped even more with trust in the institutions and saying, look, if you put honest people in office, you can trust your institutions. You put dishonest people in office, you can't trust your institutions. Instead of it being that the swamp is so bad, no matter who it is, Republican or Democrat or whatever, you can't trust them at all. And that's the attitude of a lot of Americans at this point. A lot of our friends, I feel that in many ways myself. And so over the last year, I think, though, I know for me, the president has earned back a lot of that trust. He, Marco Rubio has earned back a lot of that trust. Maybe more than anybody in the administration, RFK has earned back a lot of our trust in the institutions because he's been willing, as they have, to reveal the secrets, to basically say, look, here's some lies that have been told to the American people, no kidding, for 50 years. And sometimes it's about food. I mean, how silly can you get? Literally lies about food? You telling me that the pyramid chart for what we're supposed to eat was also a scam in order to enrich certain people and not other people? And so the telling the truth about that stuff may initially give you even more distrust, but what it does is it starts to heal and rebuild trust. And there is I believe, a significant trust rebuilding taking place because of what RFK has done to reveal so many of the lies that have come from the CDC and the FDA. And then you have all of these secretaries of, Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, first of all, an agency that should not exist in the first place at the federal level, only at the state level. But, she has come forward and given the truth of what they found with the hundreds of thousands of dead people getting benefits, of the, 500,000 people getting double benefits. She's shown the fraud. Secretary Scott Turner over at HUD has been willing to bring forth the fraud and abuse of the billions and billions of dollars of people being given housing or housing projects that never got built or whatever the fraud was, being willing to say, hey, look, this is where we got it wrong. You've got all these other agencies that are revealing immense amount of fraud. I mean, obviously the whole Somali daycare thing, all these things. Now, I will say this again, I've said it a bunch on the program, but listen, most of those agencies where the fraud is happening, it's not that better people would run that better. It's that it shouldn't be run at all. There should be no Department of Education, Labor, Housing and Urban Development. All these agencies are unconstitutional and foolishness to create that at the federal level, because you can expect the fraud to happen when it's, this huge agency 1,000 miles from your house and you don't know any of them. You can't hold them accountable. All of those things should be done at the state and local level, if at all. So anyway, that is helping to rebuild our trust. But we're not quite there yet. But what the president has done for me, I'm sorry, back to this tanker that got apparently was violating sanctions. What the president's actions have done for me, what he did with the hostages from Israel, what he did with the the bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities, what he did with Maduro, all of these actions have gained my trust because he's gone in and gotten out. He's accomplished the mission and gotten out. And so when I see one of these, this tanker board or whatever, I don't fear right now Hegseth and President Trump getting together and saying, man, we're gonna that went great. Let's do even more and let's go into this country. I don't see this like mission creep problem that you typically have with administrations and agencies and the military industrial complex and all the things that come with it. I actually so far have seen a president and an administration that has been willing to say, let's accomplish the mission and get out. Now, I say all of that not because of the tanker, but because of Iran. To say that, now the president is faced with a tough choice. He has said, we'll help the people in Iran and that we're not going to leave you alone, but yet has not yet taken specific action. He's right now it's talk, right? It's negotiation. Well, I shouldn't say that. By moving the fleet there, that is specific. I should acknowledge that. Putting us in a position to be able to help more and to intervene if necessary, which it probably will be. But, man, it's potentially a major quagmire, right? It's potentially another war or whatever. So I don't, I think this is one to keep a close eye on. But my whole point in talking about any of this was he's earned my trust to say, now, of course, as Reagan said, since we talked about Reagan in the first segment, his birthday last week, trust but verify. So I'm not trusting the president blindly or trusting the president and then not going to look back or look over or review the situation. I'm trusting that these actions that are being taken, these limited surgical strike kind of situations, and then potentially a big move with Iran, that he is reading all the chess pieces, and all of us recognize this is a potentially game-changing moment for generations if the Iranian regime can be toppled and you get back to an America-friendly regime in Iran that changes all of the terrorism. I mean, they are the chief funder of terrorism. They are behind so many of the problems around the world. And so President Trump obviously knows this, but he also knows a lot of things we don't know that he's getting briefed on. And so he's looking at all of those pieces on the chessboard, and I'm trusting the guy in the room to make the right decision regarding all of that and how far to go. And so it wasn't just about the tanker for me when I saw that headline. It was a reminder to me that I am so thankful that we live at a time where we can trust the guy in the room. And he could blow it and lose our trust. We'll see. But right now, I'm trusting the guy in the room. All right, let's get back to the phones for our last 10 minutes or so. 888-589-8840 is the phone number. 888-589-8840. And look, Sherry in Oklahoma is up next. Sherry, go ahead.
Thank you, Rick, for taking my call. I try to never miss your show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I am calling again today about something I already called about a couple of weeks ago, the filibuster.
Yes.
Now, I understand Sandy Rios felt the same as I do. We need to get rid of it. But now the latest thing is, no, we need to demand a talking filibuster. I'm sure you know more about that than I do. But I'm calling to ask everyone to call John Thune and to call their senators and to insist on a talking filibuster. My understanding is we might be able to pass the SAVE Act.
I could not agree with you more, Sherry. And what I've always said is let's go back to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which was a talking filibuster. The famous scene in the movie there, black and white, man. I mean, this is old days, but he literally talks himself to passing out, and I can't remember how long he lasted. And of course, that's a movie, but that's what we think of when we think filibuster. Most all of us, we don't, we think if you're doing a filibuster, that means you're doing the hard work. You're going up there and you're talking as long as you possibly can. That's how the state Senate in Texas works. Same thing. You got to do a talking filibuster. You don't get to just turn in a piece of paper and say, well, I would talk for 10 hours but I'll save everybody the trouble. And you just got to, here's my piece of paper. That's so lazy. What a shortcut. What a cheapening of the process itself. If you're going to do a filibuster, you should have to stand there and talk as long as you possibly can, and when you can't talk any longer, your filibuster is over. And that I can respect. That still allows for majority rule, but having this paper slip filibuster or this 60-vote requirement for cloture puts the power into the hands of the minority, not the majority. So even if you've lost the trust of the American people and you no longer have the majority in the Senate, so you haven't earned it out there on the campaign trail with the American people, and you've only got 40 votes or 45 votes or whatever, and the other side's got 55 votes, well, who should win? The 55 votes should win. The people that have the majority, even if it's only 51 votes, you should win. And that means the SAVE Act should pass. We have 4 votes probably. Maybe you might get a couple of Democrats. I think Fetterman's for it. So maybe we got 55 or 56 votes. That should be the law of the land. That's how you pass laws. The majority passes laws. And when you let the minority control things, you're in for trouble, buddy. I'm telling you. Chaos. And that's why I've never supported the filibuster. I think what they currently do with this cloture vote and with the 60 votes is absolutely wrong. And so I am all for, and I love the terminology. I think this is good marketing. Exactly what Sherry said, the talking filibuster. That's what we should all be saying. Call your senator and say, support the talking filibuster, not this paper wimpy filibuster or a 60-vote requirement to be able to pass something. The majority should rule. That's 51. Even if it's 50-50 and the vice president has to come over and break the tie. That's good. That's constitutional. That's the way our system was designed, and it actually supports the way that the founders intended it to be. Last few minutes here, and if you want to call and talk about this, I'll try to squeeze you in, 888-589-8840. But there's a hearing happening right now in Congress. My congressman, Chip Roy, fantastic congressman, running for attorney general, actually against another friend of mine, Mays Middleton, who I'd already endorsed before Chip got in the race, so I'm kind of in a pickle there. But I love Chip, and he's part of this hearing right now, this House subcommittee, to examine Sharia law and how it is not compatible with the U.S. Constitution. Now, it just so happens that tonight I am hosting a special event at the Patriot Academy campus, which, by the way, I forgot to answer that question from the earlier caller. We're hosting an event on what to do about Sharia law. How do we do this? Charlie Kirk's most viral tweet was just a one-line, Sharia law or Islam is not compatible with Western civilization. And it's not. It's not. And we've got to figure out how to win the public relations battle for the definition of freedom of religion, which I don't think includes things that subvert the public good, to use a turn of phrase by the Supreme Court. And Sharia law and Islam subverts the public good. We do not support the things that the Quran supports. We are not okay with child marriage. We are not okay with pedophilia. We are not okay with women having no rights. We are not okay with being able to, I'm sorry, I'm going to be blunt here, beat your wife, and then the imams say that it's okay. This is evil stuff that we do not support in America. It is not compatible with our Constitution and our freedom. And so I don't know what they're covering in the hearing this afternoon in Congress. We'll try to maybe review that and talk about it this Thursday. But the event that we're having tonight at the Patriot Academy campus is what to do about Sharia law, and it's going to feature Frank Gaffney, former Undersecretary of Defense under President Reagan, actually, since we were talking about his birthday. Frank was actually in the room at Reykjavik when Gorbachev and Reagan had their negotiations. Anyway, Frank's going to speak tonight. He's been warning about Islam for an awfully long time, and then we're also going to have Bill Federer. And Bill, if you're not familiar with Bill, well, I'm sure you are. He's been on a lot of our shows here on AFR. He's going to talk about the history of Islam and what every American should know about the Quran. He's got that great book on that subject. Krish Dunham is the dean of the Patriot Institute. He's been warning about Islam for 10 years. He comes from India, where it's like 6 or 7% Islamic and mostly Hindu, but certainly understands this issue. He's spoken in, 100 and something countries around the world, but he runs our institute at the Patriot Academy campus. And in my final 60 seconds, I'll just say this to answer the question about how things are going here. Incredible. They're going amazing. We're still forming Constitution City, Texas. We're still building Independence Hall so you can study the Constitution in Independence Hall in Constitution City, Texas. And you should plan on joining us on July 4th. We're going to have an amazing celebration for the 250th right here at the Patriot Academy campus. So visit our website, patriotacademy.com, to learn more. patriotacademy.com. I appreciate you listening. You've been listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.